Remember Live Aid in 1985, that symbol of concern and generosity? Did you know that during that year, the hungriest countries in Africa gave twice as much money to us in the developed world as we gave to them? The process of coercing most of humanity into debt as a means of controlling their resources, their labor and their governments began almost half a century ago. Along with the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank was set up at the Bretton Woods Conference in America in 1944. The bank's aim was to finance the reconstruction of Europe, then to develop the Third World. What this idealism really meant was spelt out in the charter they were signing: to promote private foreign investment by means of guarantees or loans made by private investors.
It attempts to portray itself as an institution looking out for the interest of not only poor countries, but for poor people within those countries. That has never been the case. The bank is promoting the interest of countries in the First World and for an elite sector in the Third World.
The world's oldest human rights organization, the Anti-Slavery Society, has declared debt a contemporary form of slavery. Nowhere is this more vividly demonstrated than here in the Philippines, where 44% of the national budget is given to paying interest charges to foreign banks, compared with just 3% for health services. Moreover, billions of dollars continue to leave this country just to meet the interest on money borrowed by the dictator Ferdinand Marcos in deals that were often secret and fraudulent. Built less than 60 miles from the city of Manila on 3 earthquake faults near 2 live volcanoes, one of which recently erupted, this is the Bataan Nuclear Power Station. The deal would be underwritten by the American government through the Export-Import Bank and a clutch of private American banks.
You have delays, you have problems. The price goes up and up and up. First to 1.1 billion, finally to 2.2 billion. Some estimate that the final cost of the Philippines will be $2.6 billion. So you have a $2.6 billion fiasco that will never produce 1 watt of electricity, which now the Filipino people have to repay.
When Marcos was overthrown in 1986, President Aquino declared the Bataan power station unsafe, and it was closed forever. At the same time, her government began legal action in the United States against Westinghouse. The American judge found ample evidence of bribery. On the day before the case, it was settled out of court. Westinghouse agreed to pay the Philippines $100 million. But remarkably, the Aquino government agreed to give Westinghouse $400 million just to make the power station work, regardless of its position in an earthquake zone. This is a country abundant in food, but food does not pay back the debt or encourage foreign investors, and so agriculture and a whole way of life is being structurally adjusted. This is the Calabazon Super Project, turning food-growing land into factories for export production. Funded largely by Japan, it is the kind of so-called reform demanded by the IMF. The new factories will produce new revenue and profits for foreigners. They will also produce new debt for the Philippines. By the year 2000, hardly a tree will be left standing. Forests as big as Denmark have been wiped out, bringing to an end one of the richest ecosystems on the planet.
They must cut down their forests. They must dig up their minerals and ruin their land, producing cash crops so that they can earn enough hard currency to keep on paying the debt.
Manipulation of the World Bank was documented in the early 1980s in a secret US Treasury report. The United States, says the report, is capable and willing to pursue important policy objectives in the banks by exercising the financial and political leverage at our disposal. In fact, the United States was able to tailor the UN Security Council to its war plans by using debt in the international banks. Egypt was told that if it joined the coalition, $14 billion would be wiped off its national debt. The day before the ground attack, the bank approved a loan to Iran of $250 million. And China received the first World Bank loan since the Tiananmen Square massacre, just 1 week after the Chinese foreign minister met President Bush at the White House. Outside the bank, Syria was promised a $1 billion arms deal brokered by Washington. The vote of the non-permanent members of the Security Council was critical. Minutes after Yemen voted against the resolution to go to war, a senior American diplomat was instructed to tell the Yemeni ambassador, that was the most expensive no vote you ever cast, meaning that $70 million in American aid to one of the poorest countries in the world would be stopped. The debt of all poor countries accounts for less than 5% of the loans of commercial banks. If the debt was cancelled unconditionally, the banks would hardly know the difference. Given that most countries do have enough resources to provide for their people, why should they have to tolerate a system that forces parents to watch their children die slowly? Indeed, why should the burden of debt fall to those least responsible for it? Above all, why should the lives of ordinary people be controlled by a few who are themselves unaccountable and whose decisions and judgments are dictated by a belief that economics is meant not to serve people, but as some kind of holy writ requiring regular offerings, even blood sacrifices, to a god called the bottom line?